Hi folks, Steve Hagenbuch here from Audubon, Vermont. We're out here today in my family's maple sugar bush, which is a forest that we manage to produce sap from maple trees that we can then take back and boil into maple syrup. Perhaps some of you have been out to the Audubon Center, Green Mountain Audubon Center, and seen our maple sugaring operation out there as well. There you're used to seeing metal buckets on trees that are used to collect the sap that we turn into syrup. Here in our sugar bush, we use a technology called pipeline, which many maple producers use today. And if you look over here to the side, you'll see these green tubes that are connecting our maple trees. The sap will flow through those tubes and down into a tank at the bottom of the forest instead of having to go around and collect them with buckets. And we've got about 300 trees that we collect sap from here in our sugar bush. But today, the sap's not running all that great. Weather's a little bit cool today, so the sap's not running very well. So we're taking a little bit of a break from sugaring to come out and do a little birding in the sugar bush. And on our walk up here today, we heard a brown creeper, we heard a black-capped chickadee, which actually there are some singing here right now. But the bird song that we're experiencing today is absolutely nothing like what we'll hear and see when we come back up here in another 2 months towards the end of May. Because at that time, the migratory birds are going to be back in our sugar bushes and all of our forests throughout Vermont, trying to raise the next generation of their species. And in fact, our forests here in Vermont, including our maple sugar bushes, have some of the greatest number of bird species of anywhere else in the U.S. when it comes to the breeding season and birds trying to nest successfully. So our sugar bushes are really, really important places for these bird populations in order to persist and do well out there on the landscape. So as part of a program that we developed at Audubon, Vermont, called the Bird Friendly Maple Program, which is a partnership, by the way, between Audubon, the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation, and the Vermont Maple Sugar Makers Association, we're trying to help create an awareness amongst Vermont maple producers and the general population of folks about the important role that our sugar bushes play in bird conservation. So we're asking folks to think about bird habitat when they're out managing their sugar bushes. Well, there was a pileated woodpecker over there in the distance, so there are some bird activity out here today as well, which is good to hear. But we're encouraging folks to think about the pileated woodpecker and other birds as well when they're managing their sugar bushes, managing these forests. And in doing so, we give folks kind of a way to promote themselves, to market themselves to consumers to indicate that they're part of this program. And we'll come back to that here in just a little bit. But you might be asking yourself, well, isn't any forest or any sugar bush bird friendly? There's our pileated woodpecker again, making its presence known. I think we'll find some other things indicating its presence here in a few moments. But that's a good question about, aren't all sugar bushes good for birds? Well, and the answer to that, in fact, they are pretty good, because sugar bushes stay as forest. And really one of the biggest threats to any bird is when the forest is no longer there. So forest as forest is a key thing, so sugar bushes inherently are good for birds, but the way we manage them, the way we take care of those forests, then can make them just okay for birds or make them very, very high quality habitat, making birds, giving them the opportunity to nest successfully, and that's what we're looking for. So what is it we're looking for? What is it that will make our sugar bush bird friendly? Let's take a look at some of those features. Number one, more than maple. So as you might suspect, in a sugar bush, you certainly want to have maple trees because that's what you want to collect your sap from. But we also want some other tree species out here as well. And actually, if you take a look behind me, back through here, you will see quite a few sugar maple trees. But there are also some trees, like there's an American beech back there. There's actually an eastern hemlock, and there's some hemlocks toward the back on the cliff band over there. We also have white ash in these forests. So we do have a variety of tree species. In fact, overall in our sugar bush, only about 35% of the trees in here are sugar maple. The rest of them are other species, and we like that. That's a good thing to increase the number of birds that we'll find in our forest. The second thing is to think about our sugar bushes in layers, kind of like a layer cake. So we don't just want to have the big tall trees that we tap to collect sap from. We want to find vegetation in other parts of the forest as well. And a great example of that would be what we see right back here. You'll see that small tree that's no more than 6 feet tall. That's a sapling of a red spruce. So that creates something we call understory in our forest. Low, woody plants in the lower levels of the forest, where birds like our black-throated blue warbler like the nest, and that's a great bird that we won't find out here if we don't have some of that understory vegetation. The next layer we're going to look at is over on this side of me, where we'll see that we have some American beech trees. They still have some leaves on them from last year, the fluttering in the breeze. That's what we call the mid-story of our forest, of our sugar bush. And birds like the wood thrush potentially would nest in dense patches of mid-story vegetation like those beech trees provide over there. So we want to see that layer cake effect, understory, mid-story, and then of course the canopy overhead, because birds are nesting in different layers of the forest. Number 2, dead wood matters. So it's not just the live plants, it's certainly not just the maple trees that we're tapping, they're important to us. So are the dead trees that are still standing in the forest. Great example of that, look right here. Remember that pileated woodpecker that we just heard a few moments ago? Well, here on this standing dead tree, or snag as we call them, we'll see that there are lots of holes that have been excavated by pileated woodpeckers. Those are feeding cavities, so the woodpecker's looking for insects that were in there, and they create those big openings that you see here. Sometimes we'll find smaller holes on the trees, and those might be nesting cavities that birds are making a smaller hole that they can nest inside of with their young. So we like the standing dead stuff. Eventually, that standing dead tree will fall to the ground. And when that happens, we get what we call coarse woody material, or down woody material, on the forest floor. And as you look around, you'll see that there are some logs on the forest floor here in various states of decay. All of them have real importance to habitat, not just for birds, but for other types of wildlife, things like salamanders and insects and spiders as well, which make great bird food, by the way. So that down woody material is really, really important to us, too. Fortunately for us, one thing we don't have in these sugar bushes, which makes them actually bird-friendly, are non-native or invasive plant species. Some of those things like honeysuckles and buckthorn that we do find in some of our forests really are not that great for birds because the food that they provide, the berries that they provide, aren't the highest quality for our birds to be feeding on later in the summer. And thankfully, we don't have any of those in our sugar bush, so we don't need to worry about addressing those concerns out here. So really, when it comes down to it, a bird-friendly sugar bush is one that is more like a natural forest. It has a variety of trees, species. It has a variety of layers of vegetation. It has standing deadwood. It has deadwood on the ground. There's a whole lot of stuff. In fact, one of the terms we use is a messy forest is a good forest. And that applies not just to a general forest, but to our maple sugar bushes as well. So anybody who gets involved with us from the maple community in this program get a variety of things that they can show off themselves and kind of promote themselves. One thing they get is the metal sign they can put up on their sugar house, inside their sugar house, wherever they'd like to display it, to let folks know that come visit them, hey, we're participating in this really important sugaring and bird conservation project. And then one of my other favorite ones is the label that we have here on our maple products. This is syrup produced from our sugar bush here, and so we put that bird sticker right on to our containers so that when a customer comes along, they'll say, hey, what's that all about? And we can explain what bird-friendly maple project is to them. And hopefully, Vermont's maple industry will remain a very, very sweet thing for us, as well as for our bird populations. So thanks for visiting out here with us today, folks. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day and get out in the woods. Bye-bye now.